Welcome to Politicus, the only podcast that discusses politics and public service from the Portuguese-American perspective. Here we discuss everything from federal policy, local issues, and US-Portugal relations with the goal of driving more discussion and awareness of the issues affecting our nation, our community, and what we as Portuguese-Americans can do about it. And now, Politicus. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Politicus. My name is Angela Samos. And Denise, how are you?
I am great. And this is a very exciting podcast. As all of them, but this is super exciting.
Yeah. We have our very first East Coaster, as well as our first state elected official. So let's bring him in, Senator Michael Rodrigues from Massachusetts. Welcome, Senator.
Hello. It's nice to be on. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast.
Oh, pleasure is ours. Thanks for making the time. I know you're in the middle of a busy time right now, and so we appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anything for PALITICUS. I appreciate all that PALITICUS has done for the Portuguese-American community over the years, and I'm happy to give back a little bit.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot. And so, this is a national podcast, so we do have listeners from all over the country. And while our listeners in Massachusetts might be familiar with your story, folks in California and other states may not be. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became involved in public service to get us started?
Oh, absolutely. I'm third generation Portuguese-American. My grandparents immigrated from Portugal to Massachusetts in 1918 from my grandmother and her side of the family. One side is from Lisbon. The other side of the family are from the Beira Alta, the Mangualde area. And, they came to America like so many immigrants do, in search of the American dream. And they settled in the town of Westport, of which I still currently reside in. Proceeded to have 13 children.
Wow.
And so I have a big family, which is very convenient during election time, let me tell you. And public service has always been in our blood. My grandfather became an American citizen in 1936 and was elected to local office in 1956 as a highway surveyor. He was responsible for the roads and in byways of the town of Westport. And he served in that position until he passed away in 1961. And my dad and so many of my aunts and uncles have been involved in the community, whether it's the church community, whether it's in elected office on local levels, as members of the school committee, as members of the Board of Selectmen, whether it's volunteering in Boys and Girl Scouts or coaching Little League, baseball, and basketball, and soccer. So public service has always been in our blood. And my first foray into political public service was as a appointed member of the town finance committee, where I served for 8 years as an appointed member. My first run at elected office was 21 years ago in 1996, where I ran for the position of state representative, and I was successful. And I served state representative for 15 years. Then in 2011, I ran for the state Senate position, which I was successful, and I've served as a Massachusetts state senator since 2011. And it's been, I owe a lot of my success politically to the Portuguese-American community here in southeastern Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. We have well over 50% of my constituents are Portuguese-American, probably closer to 70% because now we're on third and fourth generation. Primarily from the Azores, primarily they're Azorean Portuguese, but there's a few pockets of us continents.
And Senator, what are some, because you have probably one of the highest percentage of Portuguese Americans, someone serving in a statewide level. Well, definitely out here in the West Coast, we don't have that high percentage because we're so dispersed. But what are some of the issues that you have felt that have affected primarily the Portuguese American community that you have represented, as part of your constituent base, whether in State House or now in the State Senate?
I think
are there issues that are specific to the Portuguese American community, or are we pretty much mainstreamed with the issues?
I don't think there are any particular issues relative relative to the Portuguese-American community, as it differentiates from all of the American community. They've assimilated the Portuguese immigrants, and their future generations have assimilated very well into the population. There were some issues relative to language barriers, that has kind of passed, ensuring that state forms and applications were available in Portuguese, not just, it was always available in English and Spanish, but to incorporate Portuguese. But those issues are really issues of the past. I think they're pretty much, their concerns are the concerns of all of my constituents, whether they're Portuguese American or not. They just want an opportunity for them and their families to get a good education, to participate in the American community, whether it's in the business community, whether it's in the public service community, and they've done a very good job. And a lot has changed in my lifetime. Back in the 1960s, where there was a great wave of immigration, primarily from the Azores, there were a lot of prejudice and bigotry against the Portuguese from the more established, primarily European communities, whether they were the Irish Americans or the French Canadian Americans. But that's, over the years, the Portuguese in this region have grown to be well respected and admired for their values, whether it's family values, whether it's their work ethic. They tend to be very loyal, hardworking employees. They keep beautiful homes. They've moved into neighborhoods that some of the housing was blighted and old and needing upgrade, and they've turned these neighborhoods into showpieces. And so they're very well respected.
Now, having such a high percentage of Portuguese, so we have talked to a few representatives out here in California where, we just talked to somebody where her city is 54% Asian, right? So it's a completely different demographic. And and also being here in the Bay Area, most important issues are housing, affordable wages, things like that. For your community, do you see some of those same issues?
Well, I think in my particular district, which is about 60 miles south of Boston, the big issue is jobs and economic opportunity. Now, Massachusetts is flourishing. The city of Boston is booming. As I drive into the State House every day, all I see are cranes and construction going on everywhere. That economic prosperity has not come down yet to southeastern Massachusetts, where I represent. So that's the big issues. And the jobs that attracted so many immigrants, and in this case, Portuguese American immigrants in the apparel and textile industries and the factories, they're all gone. They started leaving in the 1970s and 1980s to primarily to southern part of the United States and the Carolinas and Georgia. But now those jobs are all transferred overseas to Southeast Asia and the like. So transforming this district, this hardworking blue-collar district, into a 21st century economy with opportunities for my constituents has been the most challenging. And, we're making gains. Every year it gets a little better and a little better in levels of education attainment, in terms of 21st century jobs coming to the region. But that's been the biggest challenge, and that's what differentiates probably my part of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts from Greater Boston. I mean, Greater Boston is just booming right now.
And you mentioned immigration. So is that something that is, so immigration from Portugal has clearly dropped off considerably, but do you still get immigrants from Portugal, or is there another group coming in that
very, it's slowed down a great deal. There aren't many at all immigrants from Portugal. We get quite a few from other Portuguese-speaking countries, primarily Brazil. We have a lot of Brazilian immigrants, but that slowed down also over the last few years. I think they were coming to my district, southeastern Mass, because of the predominance of the Portuguese-speaking community. You can't go anywhere in my district and not hear, see, or smell the influence of Portuguese Americans, because we know that we have the best cuisine in the world. There's every weekend in the summer, there's a parish feast. There's a festa. I'm proud to say I march in 8 processions a year through various, churches, church feasts throughout my district. So the influence is everywhere, but immigration is really not a big issue in my district.
And based on that, Senator, how do you, and I know your service, your public service, and your record in public service, which is exemplary, but I know you're also an active member of the Portuguese American community in many ways. And so how do you see something that we're already dealing with in California, because immigration to the East Coast continued a few more decades than it has for California? How do you see the community facing these new challenges of less immigrants, which at times kind of comes as a renovation, let's say, of some of the old traditions? Do you see the younger generations continuing that in Southeast?
I do, and I always marvel, for instance, in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts, that I represent, there are 4 Portuguese-American Philharmonic bands, and they're all friendly, but they all compete against one another. But to go like this past Sunday, there was a procession of feasts, and all 4 participated, and to see the amount of young people involved in the bands, to see the amount of young people marching and participating in a procession. And by young people, I don't mean young adults, but I mean children, adolescents that are actively engaged in this case, it was their church feast. But, I'm a rabid Benfiquista, so I go to a different club or organization to try to catch as many matches as I can, and they're always packed with a lot of young people, and it's wonderful. We have some very active folkloric groups and non-philharmonic music groups and bands, and all of that's a little bit to keep the culture alive. Mm-hmm. It's always a challenge, as we get into the 3rd and 4th generations, but it's been pretty successful, and I'm proud as I drive through my district and I see, so many influences of Portugal and Portuguese Americans. But we still have challenges, and we still have a way to go in some leadership positions, whether it's in our higher educational institutions, whether it's in our financial institutions, whether it's in our large corporate players. We still see a lack of Portuguese Americans climbing the rank to top leadership. Mm-hmm. And that's something that many of us have focused on over the last few years. Within the Massachusetts State Legislature, we have there are 3 senators, myself and 2 others, that are of Portuguese American roots. There are 7 state representatives, and we meet regularly as the Portuguese American Legislative Caucus, and we host Heritage Day of Portugal the first Tuesday in June up here at the State House. And so we certainly do our share of promoting our heritage mm-hmm. and our culture, and trying to almost create a farm team, as you will, of young future leaders in the community.
And one of the important aspects of keeping the community alive, of course, is the contacts that one has, whether it be an immigrant, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or even 4th generation, with the motherland, with the land of your forefathers. And I know that you keep in contact with Portugal, and I'd like to discuss a little bit something that Fundação Luso-Americana para o Desenvolvimento FLAD has put together for the last couple of years, which is Legislators Dialogues, and I know that you have been an intricate part of that. And if you could comment on that opportunity to meet and to also to dialogue with not only your fellow state representatives from Massachusetts, from other states in the union, from at the federal level, and also with the Portuguese government and legislators in Portugal. How important do you think this process of FLAD to bring in this dialogue can have important repercussions or not in the community?
Immensely important. I think critically important. Up until FLAD started sponsoring these Luso-American dialogues, I had very little, if any, contact with elected officials from outside of New England. Of course, I border Rhode Island, so I knew my colleagues. One of my best friends is Senator Dan DuPont in East Providence. So I had contacts with the local regional New England legislators, but I really did not know, for instance, Congressman Nunes, whom I know now, and Concosta and Valadao, and former state senator Jack Martins in New York, Rosa Rabimbus in Connecticut, even though Connecticut's, abuts Massachusetts, she's kind of down in the southern corner of Connecticut. And so we've all gotten to be good friends. We try to stay in touch. I think more work can be done rather than just once a year. We meet. In the last few years, we've been meeting in Lisbon, which is wonderful. Prior to that, we met in D.C. I think there's more work that needs to be done at keeping us together and have some more regular dialogue rather than just once a year, annually. But that's a challenge for us, and maybe that's something, Flod and Paulkus and those of us that are interested in that can work on together to try to make that happen.
Senator, do you feel that it's been important as far as networking with your colleagues, but also in your case, I know you've had lots of contact with Portugal, but I noticed as I participated this last year, had the honor of participating with all of you, that it was a way for some legislators to also to get to know modern day Portugal, because sometimes what they know of Portugal is the Portugal that was told to them by their grandparents.
Absolutely. I've been I've been traveling to Portugal regularly for the last 35 years. So I've seen Portugal grow up post the revolution. And I know Portugal now is a vibrant, modern country. And the vibe you get in Lisbon now is just amazing. Same thing with the Azores, primarily with St. Michael's, San Miguel. Even though I'm not from Azorean roots, most of my constituents are. So I travel to St. Michael's as regularly as I travel to Lisbon, and to see San Miguel grow up into a 21st century island, and especially Ponta Delgada, has been amazing. And for my colleagues that have not had that opportunity to go and visit both the Azores and to Lisbon, has been their chance to see, what Portugal is. It's not like it's not the Portugal that my grandparents immigrated from, and it's not the Portugal that when I first started visiting in the early 1980s, it's grown up into a real 21st century player, and I think it's important. I spend a lot of time. I'm like the pseudo Portugal travel consultant in the State House and around everyone. I have 3 of my colleagues visiting Portugal this month in August, and all 3 have come up to me for suggestions of where to stay, where to eat, tourist spots, what to see, what to avoid. And someday, God willing, when I retire, it's going to be my passion is to promote Portugal to the non-Portuguese Americans, promote Portugal to all the Americans as a place to go and really, really enjoy yourself and see a lot of culture, eat some great food, drink some great wine, watch some great soccer, and do it at an affordable price.
Right.
Correct.
With the amount of travel that you do between, the US and Portugal, and having seen it grow over time, I'm curious to your perspective on, how have things, how have things here affected things there? But I would almost say vice versa. How have things there affected things here as well? Because I remember the first time I ever saw Wi-Fi being used in a car was in Portugal before I saw it here. And they have, every time I go there seems to be some sort of new innovation or new thing that is brilliant that we still don't have here. So I'm curious because,
and what a good point you make, Angela. It's true. You get Wi-Fi everywhere in Portugal. I tell folks in San Miguel, you will have cell phone service everywhere you go on the island. You will be connected by cell phone. I think a great opportunity for Portugal, and something that I've been having a lot of discussions with, and especially with Bob Sherman, the former U.S. ambassador to Portugal, who's from Massachusetts and is a personal friend of mine before he even went to Lisbon, is a way to position Portugal as the portal, as the entryway into the European community. Now that the UK has decided to leave the European Union in Brexit, well, the natural place to be that entry portal to the EU is Portugal. And Lisbon has all of the infrastructure that they need in this 21st century to serve at that capacity. And that's, today I had meetings with, actually it was a California company, but that was in Boston, a life science company, because California and Massachusetts are really the biotech life science leaders in the world. And he was picking my brain because his company is going to Lisbon in 3 weeks. And I'm going to introduce them to Flawed and, so some folks over there. So I think Lisbon and Portugal in particular, and even Porto now. Porto is really coming on strong over the last few years, are well positioned globally to grow and thrive and prosper.
No, it's an excellent point. And even when we talk about education, the educational opportunities, I think, for exchange over there, trying to make more people aware here that, you can get a 4-year degree over there. You can study abroad over there in Portugal. It's not just for a summer, right? That you should actually take advantage of it, because as good as our education
I wish I was young again.
Yeah, I know. As good as our education might be here, it's so expensive, right? And
so I do a lot of work with Católica University in Lisbon. And the new rector, Isabella Gil, is a friend. And whenever I go to Lisbon, I usually stop in at Católica, and not really lecture or, but I like to meet the students because it's such an international, broad, diverse base of students that I just, I'm envious. And I wish I were young again, because, I would seriously consider going to study in Portugal, and their universities are as good as any in the world, including right here in Boston, which is home to 53 universities and colleges. And, everybody thinks, of course, of Cambridge and Harvard and MIT, but, they have equally good as schools in Lisbon, in Coimbra, in Porto, and Viseu that can rival any over here.
Right.
And you think, Senator, that this vibrant, new, modern Portugal is basically represented today in our communities? I mean, our communities more and more are getting in touch through technology and other means and family with this vibrant Portugal. So I think, in your opinion, regardless of what I think, in your opinion, do you believe that the communities themselves are in touch with this modern Portugal more and more?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing happens in Portugal, or nothing, especially in the Azores. Let me say that most of my community, most of my constituents are more connected with the Azores, but nothing happens over there that doesn't instantly resonate here in my district in the United States. Whether it was the recent fires that devastated central Portugal, whether there's any natural catastrophes that happen in the Azores, landslides or monsoons or anything, whether there's not, the politics over there. I mean, the politics in Portugal is so much different than the politics in the United States. But they follow it very closely. My constituents know what's going on, whether it's on national politics or even the local politics in the individual freguesias.
Again, we have our own theories, but why do you think that is? Because I would say that's probably not exactly the case here in California. Denise, I don't know if you agree with me. I think there are some people that keep tabs on, the political spectrum in Portugal and, travel. But is it just a geography thing, or is it
I think so.
Generation of immigrant thing? We're certainly further away out here. I just find that...
I think geographical proximity, certainly. I mean, we have daily direct flights out of Logan Airport in Boston, 4.5 hours to San Miguel, 6 hours to Lisbon. We have TAP is flying now daily from Boston to Lisbon. So I think it's certainly proximity. And I think it's also the generation of the immigrant community, the massive immigration that happened in the 1960s, just pre-revolution, that were actively engaged in what was happening back in Portugal during the revolution, during the new democracy that established itself in Portugal, and being in America and being free to express their opinions, whether it was pro-democracy, and I can remember as a young man the debates and seeing how close that Portugal actually came to becoming communist controlled, as you remember, and the stuff that happened with Carlucci and Kissinger, and just post the revolution. But being in as young immigrants, as new immigrants in a country where they were free to express themselves, and where technology was improving so that they can get news and access to information quickly, certainly not as quickly as today. Today it's instant, but still in a much more timely manner, that you didn't have to wait for letters from the old country to know what was going on.
Right.
That you had access to the daily newspapers. You had radio, transatlantic radio broadcasts happening. I think that's why being here on the East Coast with the newer generation of immigrants, why there's so much more interest and knowledge of what's happening in Portugal.
Indeed, and I think that, as you mentioned, also the large percentage, we are a little bit more spread out throughout California, and there's not one very large community. It's just we're all over the state, as you very well know. And years ago, there was a standing joke in the quote-unquote anecdotal situation in the Portuguese-American community, or about the Azores, and that was when our good friend Dr. Mota Amaral was president. They used to say every time he had a dilemma to be resolved in the Azores, he would go to Fall River.
Yeah, well, Dr. Mota Amaral is like a god in Fall River.
Yes,
I've had the opportunity to be with him many times and to march in processions with him, and he is revered by the Portuguese-American community in southeastern Massachusetts. Plus, like as you keep saying, the concentration in numbers come election time, whether they're local elections or state elections or even national, federal elections, people, everybody wants to be Portuguese, during election time, and they're a political bloc to be reckoned with. And it's easy to see why when you go to a reception and there are 500 or 1,000 people, at the reception, for any sort of Portuguese event, it's a large voting bloc.
Mm-hmm. So I do want to touch on I guess the current state of things just in the country to get your thoughts on, because I was listening to a different podcast, political podcast, that was saying, if there's a silver lining to any situation for where we are today, there's been an increase in interest from the public, an average citizen, to get involved, to make a difference in some way, shape, or form. So the level of interest in public service is unprecedented in recent years. And I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on that? And then what's your advice to people who feel like they want to get involved or do something, whether you're really happy with how things are going or you're really unhappy with how things are going in our current political climate? What do you advise? What do you?
I guess I'd go back to the basics, to where I started and where I see so many effective leaders where they start locally. Start something where you're comfortable with. Volunteer as a youth sports coach. Start there, and then you become more involved in the community, and then find where your skills, your individual skills, can make a difference to improve the community. Some cases it'll be in elected office, but participate. I tend to come from Massachusetts tends to be a very politically active state anyway. So, although I see a lot of energy of what's, based upon what's happening in Washington, I'm proud of the fact that stalemated politics has not transferred itself into the Massachusetts State House. I mean, we are a democratically controlled legislature. Both branches, the House and Senate, are overwhelmingly Democrat. We have a Republican governor in Charlie Baker, and we get along great, and we get a lot of stuff done. We certainly disagree, but none of our disagreements are personal. We respect each other. We understand that both sides have the same goal in mind, is to make Massachusetts a better place to live and to work and to raise a family. We might have different ideas on how to get there, but at the end, we know how to compromise. We readily communicate with each other, because I think that's a big problem oftentimes, is failure to communicate properly. So get involved however you're comfortable. It could be elected office. It could be volunteering in a school or in a church community, or at a social service agency. Be comfortable, be yourself, but be respectful of others and others' opinions, and just try to make your community better.
That's very well said.
Oh, thank you.
I think it's great advice, and something that people may not always think about as far as getting involved locally. When they think of public service or politics, they think of running for office, not volunteering. So I think it's a good point you raised. So thank you.
Yeah.
Denise, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts, just to thank the senator for taking the time to express his opinions, and obviously to his enlightening words of wisdom, and to thank him also for his involvement, because I know he's very widely known and respected in Massachusetts, but he's also known and respected in many other communities throughout the United States, and we have to get him out to California one of these days.
I can't wait. I can't wait to come. I've been to California on business a few times, but never really have been gone to where do anything Portuguese related in California. So you've got to get me out there. I want to come.
Yes, the California Portuguese-American Coalition that you are aware of has to put that as a priority, and I do think that that's important because of the legislative dialogues in Lisbon. I believe we can build upon exactly the way you said it.
Well, I think we have something to learn from you, and I would love to see how it operates and how it works and how it functions. And so we've got something to learn, and I'm anxiously awaiting the opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, we have to get you out of California, and we appreciate all you do, obviously, for your constituents and for the Portuguese-Americans in Massachusetts, but throughout the U.S., and for this special bond that you've created with Portugal. I believe this is very, very important. The transatlantic relationship is something that means a lot to all of us, independently what state we live in the Union.
Well,
yeah, agreed.
It's easy. It's easy. It's really a passion.
Thank you, Senator.
And with that, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Thanks, Denise, as always, for being here.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigado.
Obrigado. And thank you to our listeners for being here with us for another episode of Politicus. We hope that you have found this conversation enlightening and encouraging to go and get involved in the community and public service in some way, shape, or form. If you haven't subscribed yet, please click that subscribe button and share this podcast with friends and family so we can continue the conversation and really get more people active in public service, more Portuguese people active in public service. And please leave us a review on iTunes or SoundCloud that will help others to find our podcast and be enlightened by people like Senator Rodrigues as well. So thank you all, and until next time, have a great day. Thank you for listening to Politicus, the official podcast of PALITICUS, the Portuguese-American Leadership Council of the United States. PALITICUS is the premier national organization representing the interests of the Portuguese-American community at large. To learn more about PALITICUS and how to become a member or to make a donation, visit www.palcus.org. To submit feedback or suggestions about the podcast, email us at palcus@palcus.org. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests of the show are not endorsed by PALITICUS.